Hello and welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piskor.
And I'm Tom Scholey, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
Today we're going to be looking at The Silver Surfer, The Ultimate Cosmic Experience. This is a fireside graphic novel by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Before we open this up, I want to invite everybody watching to like, follow, and subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Hit that bell icon beside the subscribe button, and you will be notified when we post a new video, which will give you a leg up on the Kayfabe effect. You'll be the first ones in line on eBay, Amazon, or at your local comic shop, trying to track down whatever comic we showed off that day. Hopefully you get there before it's sold out, or you get there before the prices go through the roof. So you want to hit that notification button, and also let these videos play through to the end. That allows YouTube's algorithm to share the videos with other comics fans who haven't found Cartoonist Kayfabe yet. It is the way we grow this channel. 60,000 plus strong and growing, on our way to 6 million. So we appreciate your help on that. But the story here, Marvel's first real graphic novel, right? This is the late 70s. One of Kirby's kind of final jobs at Marvel, I believe.
Yeah, it got him out of his contract. He had to do a certain number of pages to be out, and this helped him bat those out.
And, you know, the idea of the graphic novel, Fireside distributing their books to, through book channels, which was atypical at that time, and following on the heels of Contract with God, Will Eisner, and the whole term graphic novel. So 100 pages, original material, and I don't know, man. It's just an interesting artifact, especially for that time period.
Yeah. I'm so glad that Jack Kirby did this, just so that he could say, I touched comic strips, I touched editorial illustration, I touched comic books, I touched the full issue story, and he's got a 100-pager under his belt. My relationship with this comic as a reading experience, to me, it's like when if you ever saw Beavis and Butthead Do America, or the Simpsons movie, where at a certain point it's like they're so good at a certain format, and when they try to expand that format, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
it's clearly smart people who do their thing, but it's like I never saw the Simpsons movie 2 times. I never really saw Beavis and Butthead Do America twice. This thing is a reading experience. It's all over the place. Stan and Jack, they don't know how to do it.
Oh yeah, it's weird.
And keep a 3-act structure or something, but it's a magnificent thing to behold, visually.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in there. Before I go in, I want to say Earl Norem on this cover, based on a sketch by Jack Kirby. Have you guys seen that sketch?
It's actually a fully drawn, inked by Joe Sinnott image that was intended to be the cover, and then I guess someone made the decision of an Earl Norem cover.
It makes sense because they're chasing bookstore sales and stuff, so every paperback has some sort of
it's commercial art.
Yeah,
we've been looking at those art catalogs, Ed, and they have the commercial art next to the comic art, and a lot of it's paperback covers, in the commercial art side of it. So you can see how that comes, why they would do it. The other Fires also by Stan Lee.
Well, yeah, this is coming out of all those little compilation books that Stan Lee, and the authorship of them was like the little text accompaniment. The comics were just kind of there for fun.
Yeah.
And look, by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, that's an unambiguous crediting there.
And Simon and Schuster, a legitimate publisher of books.
And then I think it's here. It says copyright. Copyright Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Another thing Kirby never got in his entire career at Marvel.
Wonder what you get from that copyright if you're Jack Kirby. Yeah. It's not like he can go out and reprint this himself.
Yeah, I think you get to keep your artwork or something. Congratulations.
Well, you own the story that's here. You own the artwork. There are ways you could publish this. You couldn't call him the Silver Surfer. Maybe you'd have to put a mustache on him. But there is precedent to this kind of thing of somebody taking, and giving it a minor tweak. So he owns all of that. And I've seen a lot of the behind the scenes material for this. It's published in the Jack Kirby Collector. And there's pages where it's it would be a drawing of the Devil's Advocate, and it'll say, and Jack Kirby did this, and it'll say at the top, it'll say, I, Jack Kirby, am creating this character, the Devil's Advocate, to be published in the Simon and Schuster. By this point, he's been through the ringer. He's gotten all his punches to the face, and so he's following, taking legal advice to make sure he doesn't like lose whatever he creates here.
Tom, anything stand out to you in this intro by Stan Lee in terms of, he talks a little bit about the origins of Silver Surfer, gives Kirby credit pretty much for showing up with this character, in the famous Fantastic Four, 48, 49, 50 Galactus trilogy, and it's like, what is this character, Jack?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of like instances where Stan Lee, like there were witnesses and things, so Stan Lee is kind of forced to fully acknowledge somebody, and then everything else is in that gray area in the dead zone. And then he quotes Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which is like a really important book to Stan Lee. He's talked about it his whole life. Some of like the last video we have of Stan Lee is him like quoting passages from it. It's this collection of poems and things that mean a lot. Like, to me, it always seemed very pretentious the way he talked about. Like, I'll bet his favorite the book is not. It's like some piece of shit, but it's like he feels this sounds good.
It almost reads like some of that hyperbolic Stan Lee speak.
You can see the influence, especially like Doctor Strange or whatever.
It's funny to think of like his takeaway would be like the vernacular or something. Like, oh yeah, I'll have one of my characters speak like this.
Well, I think like Stan's the kind of guy like. He feels like this is like a very profound statement,
Sure. Well, let's dive in. Speaking of profound, I agree, Ed, with everything you said about sort of the pacing and stuff being very bizarre and off. Mm-hmm. But man, the art is on.
That's all
There's
that matters.
So much showing off. And I wonder, like, having that extra page count for Kirby, if that was just like perfect for him to be like, oh yeah, full page or different kind of grid on this page. It feels like we're going to get a lot of that right from the get-go. I mean, like, badass, right?
And there's animation to it.
Joe Sinnott was promised, and this is why he agreed to do this. He was promised that he would be credited up here too, and it looks like somebody like deliberately blacked out his credit.
There's space for it, right?
And he is like the unsung hero of it. Like, we're talking about the graphics. I mean, Joe Sinnott's a big part of that. And yeah, the storytelling, it's saggy, it's bloated, but these images continue to this day to be used again and again by Marvel on like advertising, on merchandising. Like he created some of the definitive images of the Silver Surfer in this late work.
One of the knocks I would always read about Kirby, and like whenever he goes to the Fourth World and he's writing himself, like I'll hear people criticize his writing. You guys need to shut up, because like the writing in this it's embarrassing, some of the text in this. So I don't think you can criticize Kirby's Fourth World scripting and hold this up.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, and Stan Lee was like, I would say like semi-retired as a writer at this point. And he was on this project, he was in that mode of like, hey, I'm Stan Lee. You do the work, bring it to me. I'll look through it. And if I like it, we'll move on. So the verbiage, Stan, that's his domain. He wants to be in charge of the verbiage. But the storytelling, I mean, I've seen the documents and stuff. Kirby is basically like putting together this story and like, okay, here you go, Stan. Here you go, Stan. Like, he's doing all the heavy lifting. And one way that this does work is just as like you said, animation, like looking at a series of like really beautiful sequences. And
some of these panels, there are many of these panels that I'll point out as we go, where it's like a close up or a headshot or whatever. They're just phenomenal and feel like, I don't even know how this fits in comic storytelling. It feels like a separate kind of panel that just belongs to Kirby.
The thickness of this inking, it's so adventurous, and I've never seen it tighter.
So we see Silver Surfer coming to Earth in this sequence. I don't understand where this fits in the Silver Surfer history. Is this like an expanding of the Fantastic Four story? Is this a completely original, like those stories never happened, and this is...
It feels independent. It feels like when you were a kid and you saw something like the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie or something, and you have no idea about licensing or rights, and like, why doesn't Wolverine show up, and then why doesn't Darkhawk show up, or whatever. It's just like its own...
It's
thing.
a world
it's like a motion picture. Like,
yeah.
Like,
and you think of when they would make like the Hulk TV show or
exactly.
like the Doctor Strange TV movie. This is like that era, and yeah, they take out all the stuff they didn't buy the rights for. And this specific work was created as almost like a blueprint for a Silver Surfer movie. There was interest in a Silver Surfer movie, and this was a way to kind of get like what's the Bible going to be of this Silver Surfer movie.
That's interesting to think of it that way too, because you're selling it, if it works, you're selling it in a bookstore presumably to a different audience. So it should stand alone. It shouldn't have asterisks of like, okay, go back and find Fantastic Four 48 or 72 or anything like that. It needs to stand alone. So it's kind of forward thinking in a way that it's like, hey, we've got this character that's established and had a series and all these stories, but we need this to stand alone and be for a new audience.
You know where I think they could have, like, if they would have had 22-page chapters and say have 4 of them or 5 of them, I think that it would have been more comfortable to their strengths as storytellers.
Yeah, you mentioned the Beavis and Butthead movie. I was thinking of like the Power Rangers movie, the first one.
Exactly.
They're great at like a certain format. You step out of that format, it's a learning curve. Now this is, to me, where the story starts to go off the rails, and maybe where this whole project goes off the rails, because even though Jack was doing the heavy lifting, Stan would kind of put his foot down and insist on certain things, and Stan insisted on Jack using this sort of, this character Shalabal and this origin for the Silver Surfer that Jack had no hand in and actually, resented and was, completely different one. And see how early it comes in the story. Immediately, we have to shoehorn in that he had this Shalabal who he loved a long time ago and had to give her up to become the Surfer, and kind of stops the narrative dead in its tracks, and then it's got to pick up from there. So where you could have had sort of like this fresh slate where it's like, here's some alien coming to Earth, he doesn't know what anything is, he's got to figure out what's going on, it kind of, I don't know, muddies it.
The other thing that happens, and it's verbally, is it's the Jim Shooter. Every comic is somebody's first comic, so you have to like establish the certain dimensions to the character's personality or whatever. It happens over and over and over again, where Silver Surfer is like always sort of siding with the humans and talking about how flawed they are. It's like, maybe do that once and then you could go have your adventure, but it happens every 15 to 20 pages.
Yeah, I mean, I made some notes in my copy, and just because whenever I read a comic, I'm kind of got my creator hat on, and I'm thinking you rearrange the sequence of events in here, you could get a much stronger story, because there's these sequences where Silver Surfer's like looking at a billboard and like dressing himself up as like a hip 70s guy and stuff, and it's like, have that before Galactus shows up. Have Silver Surfer come to Earth, try to stay in disguise, get the lay of the land, figure things out, and then realize that like, oh, Earth is a pretty cool place, which is what happens in the Fantastic Four version, and then have Galactus show up and him fight him. Instead, it's like ass backwards.
That makes total sense, even from like a 3-act structure point of view, where it'd be like, the Silver Surfer is already the thing that like, now the world, something has tilted, has changed. You can have an act like that ends with like, oh wait, it's worse, because now there's this world-devouring god that is actually showing up and following him here.
The dialogue, like 3/4 of the way, maybe 60% of the way, like I just quit reading it because the same story happens 2 or 3 times in here. I feel like Galactus comes to Earth like 2 or 3 times, and Silver Surfer has to like throw him off the path.
It reminds me a lot of the Mobius Silver Surfer story.
Yeah,
like there's so many parallels, and it makes me think like, is this Stan Lee just rehashing the same? In a way, it's like every superhero, right? It's just an origin. It's just origin over and over, retell the origin. That's kind of the story. But it feels very similar to that.
That's what they would say about like
Surfer.
Gene Roddenberry, that he had like one story that he would just tell over and over again, and Stan Lee maybe too.
But then you get this, and it's can't
the,
beat that with a baseball bat.
The visuals are worth the price of admission.
Absolutely.
And if you kind of like squint your eyes, or like Ed did, like ignore the text, there is a story being told here that seems pretty compelling, that maybe could be excavated.
I always wonder, like, if you're picking this book up, what do you make of Galactus? If you're not a regular comics reader, and maybe nobody was really picking this book up that wasn't, but I mean, what a weird concept you're getting here.
Here's what I will say in Stan Lee's favor, since we're bagging on him so much, is when we think of like superhero language, like Kirby is what comes to mind, but like reading this, that's not true. It is Stan and Jack that is the comic language. Whenever you see like a superhero comic in like an 80s movie or something, and with like the hark verily, like that type of shit, like that really is the Stan Lee contribution to it, and it is on display here. So like it factors in, no doubt.
I will and I don't mean to slam Stan Lee that much in this. I recognize sort of his position through all of this, and I'm mostly a Stan Lee apologist in a lot of ways. So I'm pro Stan Lee for the most part. But the Kirby stuff is interesting to me. Like, if you handed this to somebody now, or even in the last 20 years, I think it'd be a really strange thing to look at. The visuals, I mean, I like this panel. if I were going to get a panel tattooed on my body, this might be it. You know, like absolutely. You turn these pages, and each page has something that I treasure. But it is really a specific language. And if you're not into comics or you don't know Kirby, this would be a weird thing to look at because it is totally his language.
I don't think in 78 though, because people would just be like, "Oh, I remember that pop art stuff some years back." Like, so it's like a book full of pop art drawings.
Yeah.
I mean, comics, the language of sort of like the mainstream comics, what comics were, was moving away from this at the time.
That's
but
true.
it was still like not too far removed from what we're seeing here.
And just the man, what this guy can draw, just putting that pencil down on a piece of paper, not looking at reference.
He can draw apocalypse, like he can draw the end of the world, you know.
And just it's it's a train track that's warped. Mm-hmm. He just Jesus, man, I marvel at Jack Kirby.
Yeah, and he can draw it from any direction, going any direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so many different poses, and the weight of the surfer on top of that board, it's always very sound.
And then he loses his mojo when he tries to leave Earth and turns into this kind of like almost like the opposite of the Silver Surfer, like like a turd or something. What I think of this is like the unpublished Steve Gerber Howard the Duck crossover where there was the the Sulfur Surfer. He was called the Sulfur, and he was this big stinky guy on spewing fumes through the universe.
I also find it interesting looking at this stuff. Nice paper, beautiful paper.
Yeah.
The color on here is kind of interesting. That would have been atypical for your comics of the time period. We talk a lot about like reprints and the different colors and the different paper stocks and how that affects it. This would be an early version of like what happens with the good paper when you put those colors on top of it.
Yeah.
Cartoonist Kayfabe is brought to you by the comics that Ed Piskor and I make. If you want to support Cartoonist Kayfabe, pick up our comic books. Hulk Grand Design Monster and Hulk Grand Design Madness is my latest comic. It's in comic shops everywhere right now. A retelling of the 60-year history of the Incredible Hulk, featuring me as writer, artist, colorist, letterer. This is my version of the Hulk, paying homage to some of the great cartoonists that have come before me. Pick this up wherever you buy comics. Red Room Trigger Warnings, now available in comic shops everywhere. Banned in 23 countries and 11 comic shops, but even those comic shops that ban it can pick it up for you. You can pre-order or may be able to pull it out from underneath the counter. Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit. This is the second season, but every issue is self-contained, so whichever one you come across, pick it up. It's the perfect, complete story in each issue. And the Antisocial Network is the collection of the first season of Red Room, again, available wherever you pick up your comics.
Jimmy, can we look at that backdrop before we get out of here? All right, we're done paying the bills, man. Let's get back to the video.
This
famous page.
Yeah, this is the thing that's like worth the price of admission for this whole work.
And this is an iconic page that is burnt into memory. If you ever got a hold of that Marvel Abrams book, the Marvel 50th Anniversary Coffee Table book, because it is reprinted in there. And as a kid, just seeing that he's not abiding by, like, it's a spinning camera.
Yeah.
And you keep your geography just by the body of water, and he doesn't give a fuck about the rooftops matching. You know what I mean? And that, to me, that's a very liberating notion, because I just would assume that you have to keep it sound for storytelling purposes or something, and you absolutely do not. And not only that, like, this is Kirby rooftops. Like, it just looks like a piece of Kirby tech.
Yeah, it feels very pop art. You mentioned a minute ago pop art. This, to me, feels very pop art, where it's like we really are in Kirby's world.
Yeah.
And you got like the motion of the Silver Surfer. It's not like, oh, he's just getting smaller in each one. He's like moving all over the frame. His body's twisting. Like, you do see the movie that you see him like the wind's whipping and he's and you talked about, okay, longer story. Kirby's got some real estate. He wouldn't have done something like this in, like a 17-page story.
Yeah, you think of him as as mature as he's going to get as a storyteller, essentially, and now he's breathing and trying, even here, trying some stuff that we haven't really seen him do before.
Getting closer to manga pacing.
And, of course, the story, for anybody watching at home, is that Silver Surfer has decided to side with Earth, and that's what brought him into conflict with Galactus.
Sinit's doing some different stuff with the dots here. I think you got a hold of a magic marker, because that really does just look like dabs. They're all uniform in shape.
Yeah, it's very true.
Now you compare this to like the original sort of telling of this in Fantastic Four. They took out the Fantastic Four. Okay, that's fine. You could replace those with like maybe some like military guys or something. They took out Alicia Masters. Now that, she seems like she'd be pretty easy to replace. You just find another like, woman that he meets and learns about Earth from. But they just cut that part of the story out too. And so that epic story that like is so great and and such a famous moment loses everything.
You're right, like, because he's still godlike. Like, at least in those moments, those were human moments where he got a one-to-one microscopic view of humanity. He's literally standing on rooftops looking at them like ants, like, oh, they're pretty cool, like
they're like sea monkeys.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think I want to see them harmed.
The other part story-wise that's weird for me here is Galactus leaves.
Yeah.
It's sort of like Silver Surfer. He saved Earth, and Galactus leaves, which is in line with that original story. It's that he comes back that's weird, but he leaves, and there's almost no memory of this incident except for like the rubble and like something happened, but we don't know what.
Yeah, they wipe the mines, and then it's like, well,
and there's your
why?
aunt
Who cares?
standing on the rooftops, that watching people like ants.
Now this is where my edit kind of comes in, where it's like before you have the fight with Galactus, he sees this guy, he turns into him. Maybe he goes to a disco or whatever. Meets a girl there, and
Yeah, I think that makes total sense to me. But man, again, like some of these panels, his surfer's so strange.
He's Casper the Friendly Ghost grown up.
He sells the
So
alien
good.
idea. He definitely sells that this is an alien life form. It's not just a metal person.
I love Kirby, though, man. He's going to give you 2 pages of that, a page and a half, man. But we got to go cosmic again soon.
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah, and this is like, you're right. It's just kind of like, what is Galactus's agenda? If it were like a little better defined, and also you have this like, you have your climax up front before you've like really done anything yet. You have your climax, and then there's no like second larger climax. They're really like, at the end either.
Is this what you were talking about earlier, Jimmy? I am the then. I am the now. I am the yet to be. And then there's all the, like, more than once, we hear Silver Surfer side with Earth people and talk about, like, how they're flawed or whatever, but he still likes them. And then we're going to create pathos with Galactus because he needs to grub, he needs to eat some stuff. He doesn't want to destroy Earth, but he's gotta. And we get that several times, 3-4 times.
Yeah, that's the part. The repetition of that is the part that I think makes this story tough.
I'm curious what it would be like to read this like when I was 11. Like I was a grown up when I read this.
That's true too.
Because I think a lot of that Stan Lee-isms, like there was an age where we ate that stuff up.
I at this level, I think it would be tough. Like I love those comics. Like as a kid, I've read this when I was a kid, and it has the same shortcomings to me.
Silver Surfer always struggled with cells, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just a character that doesn't quite work or jive with readers the way Peter Parker does. Probably that's a little bit apples and oranges, but I think everybody is enthralled with this character, but I don't know that you make this character that it's as easy to make him relatable.
Well, what it is? Yeah, he's aloof, and we kind of look up at him and we admire him. But like the characters we really love, aren't
I love
that,
this panel so much. The cosmic stuff behind him in orange, that little bit of blue on his
ears.
The characters we love traditionally are like losers and schlubs.
It's the baby face thing, like we were talking earlier. Like right. You could make them sell better when they have human problems, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and he doesn't emote well, so you're not, even whenever he's struggling with something, it's kind of like you're going to get it in the dialogue.
And when he does, it's this physical, like he's a schlub, he's a drip, he's
right.
moping on a surfboard, and it's cognitive dissonance because he's flying on a surfboard over the earth looking salty.
Right.
And it's like, listen, man, I think I would be the happiest guy on the planet if I could do something like that.
I love this as a juxtaposition of panels.
Yes.
Going from like the greens of the park to like the apocalypse of one of these worlds that presumably Galactus is just destroying, devouring.
Silver Surfer is the cosmic mope, and that is like that's where Stan and Jack went their separate ways, and you sort of see their different approaches. Jack Silver Surfer was on a different journey. He's just naive, curious, interested, wants to learn about what life is. Where with Stan, he already knows everything, and he's super bummed.
I like this piece. Galactus calls out, like, I don't know, his id or something, like his evil inner part, and it's part of Galactus.
Yeah.
They both acknowledge this is part of Galactus, but Galactus is trying to figure out how to solve this problem and pulls out pretty much his evil inner evil.
Yeah, this is pretty true to life. I mean, we all sort of have this, and everybody, like Galactus is God, so everybody came out of like Ardina, the girl that Silver Surfer falls in love with. And if you excise, Stan Lee's heavy hand with like Silver Surfer is too. Silver Surfer came out of Galactus's hand on page 1. Every one of these people came out of his hand. They're all aspects of
Right.
Galactus.
And you mentioned Ardina. Here she is. So go from the evil idea, what do I do? How do I beat Silver Surfer? How do I get Earth? To here we go. The plan is now being enacted.
And we're trying to get Farrah Fawcett to maybe play her in the movie. So
How about that for a colorful sky?
And it's good too, the orange against the cools.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, the gold and silver, right?
Yeah.
I love these pages too. We've seen a couple of these like non-grid pages.
It's when he starts, it's his Captain Victory panel structure.
Yeah, Kirby's mature phase. This is where he, his last works.
I like
That
this
kind of
too for
experimentation.
a bit of a twist on his cosmic art. Like I haven't seen too much like that.
Star Wars has come out.
Fun to see.
Bite your tongue.
It's so funny.
Yeah, and like, there are very few like Jack Kirby love scenes or sex scenes or whatever you want to, and most of them are in here in this book.
Yeah, and again, a page, I haven't seen a page like this by Kirby, so cool to see him getting to do some different stuff. Again, man, these close-ups just blow my mind.
Yeah, and how about that magenta?
The coloring's interesting. I'm not sure that...
I mean, doesn't
I
this...
don't know what else you would do with this, but it is interesting to see it.
Doesn't this book work on every level except for structurally,
Yeah,
narratively?
yeah, absolutely.
This is one of those iconic pages for me out of this book.
It is, because there was like a first round that I think was like more brutal looking.
And it was a double-page spread.
And a 2-page spread, yeah. Yeah, you saw a lot more people getting shot up. Once again, also in that Abrams book.
And of course, Ardina, realizing what she is not going to sit well with Silver Surfer.
Still keeping her against those cool colors whenever she shows up, man. That's one cool thing that they brought to the table.
Glennis Ween on color, and I think this is probably some of the best coloring in the book, is how much they like make that warm color only belong to her.
Yeah.
He rejects her, sending her back kind of to Galactus. That's a cool image. All of these shots of, every page is full of them.
I wonder how many of these were sitting in Kirby's drawer, because there's all these like unpublished Galactus drawings that he has from like the 60s, where he had like these story ideas that he's like not sure if he wants to give them to Marvel or not,
Right, yeah.
And I wonder if any of them found their way into this.
I love all the stuff where it's like alien landscapes. Those are always fun. I feel like that's something Trad Moore did in that Silver Surfer Black, some of the visuals that he brought up. That guy's great.
And he's got like the villain colors, like the
secondary
purples,
joints.
the greens, yeah.
Totally.
Oranges.
Wearing a haystack on his neck.
Watchmen before Watchmen.
Yeah, and then this chapter here is like when you talk about like, oh, maybe it should have been broken down into chapters, because this is like a sort of like a digression or whatever. Okay, now they're like involved with this family that's like what's going on, and then they're looking around, and then they leave, and you never hear from these people again.
This is a cool sequence too, because the neighbors get wind of like there's an alien or something's going on. They grab their guns, they're ready to like go kill whatever this different thing is, and once they get the calm neighbor, they feel like fanatics.
Yeah, that's Twilight Zone episode.
Totally.
The monsters are doing Maple Street.
The one guy with the bunker.
And I believe this is the woman that we saw in the beginning.
It is not. Oh, you know what? let's compare, but I'm pretty sure that's not. I think it's
doesn't-
just like that's Kirby's type,
Right, but I thought she references... Yeah, maybe.
I mean, if she is, I'll have to reread it with that in mind, because you're blowing my mind, because I
Yeah, I
that
don't know
is
why
true.
I thought that. Maybe they just look the same, because I don't see the reference here.
Well, they
so-
both have blue hair.
This is always a problem for Kirby.
Because the Silver Surfer in Kirby's idea is essentially an angel.
Yeah,
he's,
like the
he's
Nephilims.
sexless.
Yeah.
And this is like a fable, a parable, a biblical story. Like these are like the kind of like bedtime stories Kirby was hearing when he was a kid.
I like this kind of inking on him, almost like you're trying to ink a glow that's coming from the middle of him. I think that's cool. And then also, like I've said it before, but I like whenever you get these fantastic characters like in somebody's backyard.
That's the thing that like nobody ever really got with like cinema versions of Silver Surfer. They always just literally make him silver and reflective, but he's luminous as well.
This is Kirby's Kniff kind of showing a bit, and when Sinnott is inking that drapery, it's this like mathematical formula of marks to like create those folds, and it's so sound. The people who try to do their version of Kirby, they can never nail the drapery, how it goes around the cylinder of the forms.
I like this kind of green or teal or whatever that's starting to come in,
and the black backgrounds, like it's approaching like Charles Burns kind of like. I always dug like when there's a dark room and you just like let a lot of like white show in the midst of all the black. When he was building this room, I was just like marveling at all the stuff that he included, because I think he kayfabes perspective and just kind of eyeballs it and stuff. But it's perfect stuff. It's like everything that can sell a suburban house of this era. You know, that's a little gaudy.
Yeah, and if you see like a comic he drew in the 50s or whatever,
it would be
it's
different.
all it's like related. It's like you see the through line, how he got from there to here. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
Just wild.
Like,
taking them into the cosmos, like that's a cool idea, right? Take these suburbanites and show them this cosmos, and they kind of respond to it. I think they capture that stuff pretty well, both art and text, of like, it's real, you know, it's not an illusion, whatever it is they experience there.
This is like past the psychedelic era, but it's still got remnants of psychedelia. It's like psychedelia merged with like the disco aesthetic or whatever.
It points to Kirby not being psychedelic in the sense of like that movement.
Right.
It's almost
it was just
like
his
it's
own
just the way his
thing that
mind works.
happened to overlap.
Yeah. This is another one of those panels I love where it's just almost incongruous, the Silver Surfer drawing versus the house style of drawing.
It's true. Yeah, it feels like even like the Dick Ayers era, like Western stories that he would do at Kirby,
And
the dashed off lines and stuff.
I'd give that credit to both Sinnott and Glynis Wein in that like those colors are even a little bit faded and washed out compared to like the punch of Surfer.
What a great way to create depth, you know, completely contrasting, you know, approaches in the foreground and background. And that yellow to purple, I mean, it's hard to get those two to work together. I like it.
Some of this stuff's great.
Just like little things, like the heel of the foot within the perspective of the board, which is just like two lines. Like there's no curve to it at all.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe if this comic were like R or X rated, maybe it could something, you know, if it were just like a lot of moments of those two just kind of lounging around and you know, fucking or whatever, you know.
This is a nice perspective, Ed. You talk about him kayfabing perspective, but it sells. You know,
Yeah.
like clearly we're looking down at them from the surfer's point of view up top, and hitting that barrier, just getting cut in half and crashing back to Earth because, well, that's the price he paid, right?
Yeah, so there's the repetition of that.
And she gets, you know, summoned back, you know, in the court of the Great Oz.
He's criticized for not drawing beautiful women, Kirby. I feel like that's a pretty good looking woman. Again, going back to that idea of comics as language, and whenever it's you need to represent this beautiful being, he's able to rise to that. That's pretty strange.
Yeah, that's heading towards like late Kirby. That's like something you would see in like you know, the
Pacific
superpowers,
comics.
yeah, or Hunger Dogs or Captain Victory.
I was looking at this drawing this week, and even like the inking line on his nose sort of defies like an inking convention.
It's also that thing too of he's had a career of these regular doses of even if he hasn't looked at the comics, like they're out there month in month out, and you get your like little sense of completion. This is a big fucking job.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a little steam is running out.
Yeah, it's an albatross. You know, it wasn't. It didn't go the way he had hoped. He had high, you know, like a lot of things. He had high hopes for this on the outset.
I assume he was doing pieces and sending them in. So like he's maybe seeing lettered pages and still moving forward, and that's whenever it's starting to be like, oh, geez, this is not going quite right.
It's that classic thing. I'm sure it's happened to you guys. I've had my own versions of it where Stan Lee talks about at the beginning, like he made a trip out to with the West Coast to sell Kirby on this, or maybe he was doing some Hollywood stuff and stopped by and they're talking about this. This is such a great image right here.
Yeah,
I like this one too, going between trees as they're shooting at him.
So you get wooed by companies, writers, whatever, and they try to sell you on an idea and how it's going to be all different and it's going to be, this great wild experience. And then the deeper you get with it, you realize it's just another, not even just another comic, it's another one of their hacky comics, and they want your name on it or they want you to participate in it, so you gotta like fucking head for the hills. That's this kind of thing. This is a great page.
I love this. I love that mask.
And just like worshiping this idol and shit, and drawing different cultures of people.
The sky color's so good. We always say, don't do a blue sky. What a sky, man.
Super hot.
It's on fire behind him.
There's like several moments in this book where it's like, ooh, that would have been a good idea for a Silver Surfer book. And like that's kind of one too, where it's like, oh, if they had gotten to that a little bit earlier of like religions developing and,
Yeah, totally.
space that out a little.
The cult of the surfer, people.
And we should say he goes through several cultures there, different locations, and it's all the same. He's being attacked by everybody. I think the first ones were Russians or comrade this and that, as they're shooting at him. And then back to like the U.S. military, he's like, we got to figure this out. And if we can't understand it, we got to destroy it. It's murder. That's the plan.
The dude with the shades would never say that. He would be like, yeah, let's fucking cut this guy up and dissect him. And
He would, in Kirby's version, he's like, you missed!
You're right.
Kind of cool to see these 9-panel grids pop up now and again.
Yeah, Kirby knows his way around them.
Man, Tom, these are your R-rated moments,
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is as close as it gets.
This is the romance comics are back.
It feels like he's not even like they don't seem the same size, but I guess they are.
Yeah, I don't know for sure.
It looks off. Like this looks maybe skinnier than this.
Could be.
Just speaking to the fact that he doesn't necessarily rule the stuff out.
Yeah, he's got Baldo Smudge ruling his panel borders. The Matrix.
Yeah, I saw that too, and it's one of those pieces. It's weird whenever these little bits of like major pop culture, like you can trace them before they become the major pop culture.
Yeah. This is another one of those pretty great sequences. Her, getting.
There's so many of these panels. If you just isolated them, they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just as images, man.
This is that era. Like his Marvel work for that second go round, like the most beautifully balanced pages, good black and whites across the whole page. Every panel is perfectly composed.
Do you guys know how long it took him to do this?
I don't, yeah.
Because I wonder, like, if this were the only thing he was concentrating on, like, he could probably draw this in a month.
Doesn't that look like he's grabbing his horse and shaking his head around? God damn it.
It's a good hand. Activating whatever those discs are.
There is, like, Stan Lee's archive or whatever that's at, like, the University of Wyoming. There's like letters, from between him and Kirby, talking about this project. So it was, an ongoing thing. And Kirby would send him batches of stuff like, oh, here's this, here's that.
Yeah, probably just in between his Ruby Spears work.
You ever think about visiting that, Tom?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I would like to take a trip out there.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. I've like going through the Hulk stuff for Grand Design and reading like all the other, the Stan soapboxes and the letters pages and stuff. I think I underestimate like how much he was visiting colleges and kind of talking comics to everybody that would listen.
It's kind of like,
it's pretty interesting.
That's what he wanted to do.
He's like Johnny Appleseed for comics.
He had a clear idea about that like it would be very valuable to have somebody like that who's promoting the company and then comics in general, but specifically the company and the works, and he was much more interested in that work than sitting down.
It seems like
and
it. Like
writing.
that's one of those things that I took away from just seeing little snippets, comments here and there spread across a decade and a half of comics or more. It seemed like he took something from that experience as well.
Yeah, he had like an agent for all that kind of stuff, like a little side business.
And the bookend sequence.
The bookends, yeah. I mean, this is great, and it kind of means more and works better if we're seeing the creation of the Silver Surfer at the or a creation, like maybe he's done this a million times, created and absorbed the Silver Surfer a million times, and this is how it ends. When you shoehorn in all that prequel kind of stuff, it just loses the punch.
Yeah, it's weird as a like from continuity point of view to read this story, and you know it doesn't sort of make sense exactly with the Marvel universe, but as a standalone book, I don't know, it's a different thing to consider.
Well, yeah, and it's like, why reference, if you're not referencing old comics, why shoehorn a thing from a different comic? You know, that throws things off track.
You also get the sense, like, because of the multitude of pages and stuff, and maybe the pick up and put down sort of technique that was probably used while putting this together. Like, Stan Lee's dialogue is very redundant. Every 10 pages or something, he says some very similar hyperbolic thing that he said just a couple pages earlier, and it's like he didn't read his earlier work up to that point to get to the pages that he's writing at that moment.
Yeah,
it bounces like that a lot.
I love the book design treatment of like their bios and photos. It's very regal to be like, here's your 2 pages, like show these guys off.
Yeah, it's nice to
and that's a great
have something
picture.
in this format. Yeah,
I always love seeing Kirby looking good in a photo,
looking
like that.
dapper. I think, like, what if he grew a mustache and sunglasses too?
John Costanza, I always associate him with DC lettering.
Yeah.
But man, that's a big letterer in my opinion. So it's kind of cool to see his name on there. And I mentioned Glennis Wynn doing the coloring already.
Heck of a team.
It is, and Joe Sinnott on inks. It's pretty good to see him, I think, on there. I think if you're going to try to sell Kirby to a new market, a bookstore market, he makes more sense than Royer. I love Royer.
Yeah,
you know, Royer's the inker for the books I was able to get of Kirby, so I love that stuff. But I think he softens it a little bit, and that's kind of a good thing for a wider audience.
This is Sinnott closer to Royer than he was last time he was working with Kirby. And I mean, you know, we're holding this thing to a high standard because, you know, it warrants it. Like, it's Jack Kirby, it's Stan Lee, you know, like, we respect this stuff. But as like a piece of pop entertainment or whatever, it's pretty great. Try watching a TV show from 1978.
That's a good point.
A hit TV, you know, the number 1 TV show. Try watching it and compare it to reading this.
Yeah, no doubt. And like, where this takes place in time, it's probably the perfect time to sort of strike the nostalgia chord with the people who were first affected by Fantastic Four when it initially came out. They've grown up a little bit. This is a more respectable marketplace that this book ostensibly will be sold in, but you keep the same team that resonated with the people who even issue 50, like read the trilogy of issues 10 years before.
You know what? I'd be really curious to hear some of that in the comments. People that were reading this at the time, how this would have been received, because it is beautiful. You know, like I do have to say that, like, for whatever criticisms we have about the story maybe not being perfectly paced or something, I think it's a gorgeous piece. Like, in production, art, all of those things, top notch. But as an object, like, how weird must this have been to pick up in 1978 if you were a comics fan and you were used to getting your comics off the spinner rack, and then you get this one week? Like, it had to be mind-blowing.
I mean, I feel like all those other books that they list, those like Stan Lee collections,
they prime the pump.
Exactly. Like, they were sort of leading towards this. It's like, okay, now we're gonna take this format and, you know, create something original and something, you know, book length.
It's fun to think about, man, because that follows the trajectory of like the treasuries, right? Where it's like, let's collect stuff, and then every once in a while you get a Superman Muhammad Ali or Captain America Bicentennial Battles that's done like using that format.
Ed, you break my heart when you say that, because now I want this as a treasury edition.
Yeah.
I would love to see this as just, imagine this,
Yes.
you know, these pages just oversized. Man, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, and it could happen. It could happen relatively soon. I mean, Marvel's back, thanks to Ed. Marvel's back to publishing treasuries.
That's right.
It really does look like we're holding this book. By the
Yeah,
way.
I know, it's great.
Shouts to Ken Landgraf.
Nice. I'll say this. We looked at the Mobius Silver Surfer. We looked at the trilogy that introduced the Silver Surfer. I have that Burn one-shot that Stan Lee scripts from the early 80s on my want list to, like, let's look at that one. I do think it's fun to, like, look at the character like Silver Surfer and see him filtered through different artists, different time periods, and kind of see what people come up with, because it's a weird character.
Yeah.
You know, Spider-Man Batman, these characters make total sense. They're dudes, you know, you can kind of at least relate to half of their personas. Silver Surfer is this other thing. It's a different beast. It's the Hulk in a way, where it's like, it's this character that is not really the superhero mold. So it's cool to see different artists take stabs at him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was going to say, there's a learning curve to making a graphic novel. Just because you made comic books all your life doesn't mean you can make a graphic novel. And even, you know, the pioneers of the graphic novel, there was a learning curve. Will Eisner's Contract with God isn't really a novel. You know, it's vignettes. It's episodic. These guys cut their teeth making short episodic things. So it is going to have some remnants of that.
Absolutely. I mean, even like editors and stuff wouldn't have been in a position at this point coming from comics to be like, okay, let's stretch this out. Let's make this act one. Yeah, it's a different beast. And in some weird ways, this is more of a graphic novel than a Contract with God.
For sure, yeah.
Listen, man, there were a lot of Destroyer paperbacks and stuff like that. Those are considered novels, right?
That's true.
Good to go?
I am.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available. It's out there, Jimmy.
Hulk Grand Design Monster and Hulk Grand Design Madness is in comic shops everywhere now. It's a retelling of the 60-year history of the Incredible Hulk, perfect for first-time Hulk comic book readers or longtime fans. I'm writing, coloring, drawing, lettering, doing everything myself. So pick that up now while supplies last, and join me on patreon.com/JimRugg.
Red Room trigger warnings, issue 1, 2, and 3 are on the stands as we speak. Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit is the name of the game in Red Room Comics. And if you see a Red Room comic out in the wild, you haven't given it a shot yet, grab any issue because they're all a complete story. It is banned in 28 countries, however. It is banned in 10 comic shops, however. But if you hit up my link tree in the description below this video, you'll be able to order and pre-order existing Red Room comics and future ones that are on the horizon. Also, you can hit up my Patreon and read those comics right now, today. $3 get you the archive. I have more than 200 pages up there as we speak, and I put new strips up every Tuesday. Tom, what do you have?
Check out Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, Fantastic Four Grand Design, American Barbarian. Check out my YouTube channel, Total Recall Show, and go to my Patreon.
Jimmy, what else do we have on the docket there?
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts and merchandise at the links below this video.
That's another great way to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Jimmy, given those marching orders, we're going to be on our way.
Read more comics.